Wow.
Wow.
Claps for that one from me.
That was good. Very good.
Claps all around.
Well, here we are, all of us.
All four of us back together.
All four of us back hanging out.
Wow.
You didn't have to be the visual version to hear that.
Yes. Welcome back to What the Podcast. I'm Ryan.
I'm John.
And together we are
Ryan and John.
on the couch, as always, producer Cara, Tafolla, and back again, Annie the Skovmand.
She's
the
back.
lovely.
Wow, you didn't even add like cyborg or anything in there.
Whoa.
Yeah, for the listeners at home, Annie is, she's here, technically,
In spirit,
in a box.
in a box.
You remember COVID?
You know what? I have a very
Oh, I
distant
do.
memory of it.
Imagine getting COVID in 2022. How
I know.
embarrassing.
Kind of
How
interesting,
freaking
right?
How
embarrassing.
sad and alone you must feel
Oh my
right
gosh,
now
okay,
in your
all right.
room.
Pump the brakes, man.
Quarantined. Like, I'm just saying, like, anything, like, in the outside world, like, you're cut off from, you know? It's just, like, kind of
That
sad.
must really suck.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
really sad.
Dang.
I will say, I can't imagine this when back in the day when it was like 2 weeks straight you had to be alone.
Yeah.
I
Because update us
I'm
on the
like-
regulations, because I think they obviously changed in today's
Yeah.
world. But what's the
Yeah.
recommended quarantine time today?
So it's 5 days, and then on the 5th day you have to have one whole day without a fever, and without any like fever reducing medicine.
So it's
Got
kind
it.
of like fluke situation.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like you have
More
to
or
have a
less.
whole day without a fever. I've been really lucky. I only had a fever my first day. I haven't had a fever since.
Nice.
And then on the 5th day, if you test negative, like you good to go. But if you haven't had a fever and you still test positive, you can test positive for up to 30 days with whatever strand we're on.
Wow.
500.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So they're basically like, yeah, just like wear a mask for another 5 days,
Smart.
you know, in public and stuff like that.
Probably a good call. But,
Yeah.
hey, well, glad you could be here in
Hey,
spirit.
glad I could be here. Yeah, I had just come back from a big old Christian camp,
Nice.
Yeah.
and I spent
Which we're going to censor the name.
yeah, I spent five
For their
5
safety,
days
Oh,
mostly.
no, name.
with a billion kids, and then I came back, and then the first day I came back, I now have to spend 5 days alone.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Who could have foreseen you were with hundreds of kids and teens for an entire week, and you came back with COVID? Let's call it thousands.
Crazy.
That's what
Wow.
our first phone
think it is
conversation
us.
that I talked to you on. I was like, wow, this is like the worst time. Like, there's never a good time to have COVID, but this is like the worst time because you spent a week in, with basically terrible cell service, like with a bunch of teenagers. You're trying to focus on the kids because it's camp, and then you come home and you want to like interact with your friends and family again, and you can't. You have to wait 5 more days.
Yeah, and it truly is horrible timing. My father is having surgery for
Oh.
knee replacement on Friday.
Oh, yikes.
And so
Gosh.
I've been extremely lucky with like an extremely mild case of COVID, like very mild.
Wow.
But because he cannot catch COVID like at all, because he's going under, he's going to have an open wound. He's getting his knee replaced. One of his 2 knee replacements he's getting this year.
Dang. Popping
And
out.
so we are like going hard on this quarantine moment, and man,
Dang. Well,
I
that
had
sucks.
a little bit of a breaking point today. You can check that out on the TikTok.
Yeah, we saw that TikTok.
Yeah, that
Yep.
TikTok was funny. I was dying. I thought it was hilarious.
I did read between the lines, Annie, and I knew that even though you were laughing, it was definitely serious. It was.
Yeah, that last one, I'm like, I'm sad.
I'm sad.
That was just me.
Pretty
No filter.
funny. Well, are you the first What's Podcast person to get COVID? Hasn't John? Did you get COVID?
I never had COVID, no.
I don't think I ever had it either.
Yeah.
Officially, I'll say on the books.
Officially, same.
Because
Same.
I did get
Honestly-
sick towards the beginning of like this whole shenanigans.
But that was before anyone could get tested.
yeah.
whenever you
There was
wanted.
no like go out and get tested. It was just like, hey, stay home, you idiot.
Yeah,
kind of situation.
Pretty much.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the COVID episode. We did it.
We haven't talked
did
about
it.
COVID very
Finally.
much in the show at all.
No, not at all.
No.
Well, you guys, as you know, last week, some big decisions were made up there at Capitol Hill. Took away some of our rights. I'm of course talking about Juul. Juul has been banned.
Juul has been banned. I heard about this.
I don't know what you thought I was talking about.
That's all I thought you were talking about.
But
That's all I've been thinking
the
about.
Juul company is
Juul,
just
that's all I've been thinking about is Juul. It's so good.
can't Juul anymore.
Can't Juul anymore.
Vape Nation is officially at war with America.
Dang.
Well, Ryan, we were just talking about this off the podcast a
Go
couple
ahead.
weeks ago, and it had been on my mind of like, you see people vaping constantly, and I was like, I don't remember people like smoking cigarettes. Like people weren't smoking this
that's
much,
because
right? Like also
This is so available to teenagers, and you don't see teenagers walking around smoking cigarettes.
I mean, it's the culture, because you did, like, you know, I feel like that was so, like, cigarettes was cool, like when you were like a teenager, right?
No.
Like, and like okay, let me go back a few decades, because I feel like it was tapering off. Like kind of our generation didn't smoke, right? Like,
Yeah, for
it
sure.
tapered off, and it was almost like, okay, like maybe this will be like young people are finally like giving up this, you know, like nicotine and everything, and then it just hit.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the generation right after us, like,
Well, I
'cause
feel
don't know,
like
did
for
kids
us-
vape in high school for you guys?
I
No.
feel like my senior
Yeah.
year, it was a lot of people vaping.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, like Emma and Noah would talk about how at Cathedral Catholic High School,
Sure. Okay.
kids
Wow.
would
Dang.
Oh, yeah, just
pull
add
out
'em.
Juuls in class,
And they're
like,
just
sneak a
only
hit.
like 4 or 5 years younger than us.
Yeah.
And so that generation, and it really just showed up, and it was supposed to be like this, like to help you quit smoking, right? Go ahead, Annie.
Yeah. I wasn't meaning to raise my hand. I just I
Yes.
realized
Yes.
like,
You have the floor.
Me.
Yes.
It's important.
I'm younger than you guys. You guys are old as hell compared to me. I'm young and
Oh
spry.
wow. Okay. Right.
Whatever.
True.
I haven't hit decay yet, unlike you guys.
Yes.
I wish it wasn't true.
When I was a freshman in high school, we didn't call them like vaping. We called them hookah pens.
Yes.
And-
I remember. I
Yeah,
remember hearing
hookah
about hookah
pen.
pens.
Yeah, and they were water vapor with
Yes.
with like flavoring in it.
But I mean, were
That
they
was
though?
like the first
I
one
think
that I tried.
That was the lie,
They had
though,
it
right?
with
Like,
Once. It was a hookah pen. I totally remember hookah pens.
Go ahead, Annie. Sorry.
Yeah, it, like they hadn't put nicotine in them yet, or the ones that we were using didn't have nicotine in them. And then you turn 18 or whatever, and all of a sudden you can go to the liquor store and get the ones with nicotine in them.
I feel like that's when the ones that were like, not like meditation oil, but like the relaxation, like
Gosh, yeah, they're like
pens.
it's essential oil. Pen.
Yes.
had like
To calm
melatonin
you
in
down.
it or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But that was the whole lie, was like, it doesn't have as much nicotine, and it's going to help you actually quit smoking, and it just, right? And then
Yeah.
turns out, no.
Just as
Well,
bad.
was hookah a big thing when you guys were in school? Hookah was big.
Yes.
For my
I mean, I feel like when we
Yes.
turned 18, it was like, oh, now we can go to hookah bars, and like kids would like go to hookah bars and stuff, but
I
not
fully
like,
remember the hookah pens.
yeah, but it wasn't like a thing. I don't
So
know.
they
Oh, in
changed
East
the
County
law
it was.
the year I turned 18 for
Okay.
hookah. Because before, when you were 18, you could go to hookah lounges,
Right.
you could smoke hookah, which is tobacco.
They bumped
Right.
it to
And
21.
they changed it to 21 the year
Yes.
I turned 18. And all the kids from my school like rioted because we'd been smoking hookah anyway. I'd only ever done it once.
Sure.
I have asthma, so it really didn't work out well for
It
me.
wasn't happening for you.
Well, we did it
No,
in college.
It was not pretty.
Right.
We went to hookah bars a couple times, and we were 19.
But it was like a couple years before that, or maybe like, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah,
I don't
we
know.
What
were
does it
19.
mean they banned it? Like the FDA or
FDA said no more Juul.
Juul-
So you can't
Juul is
sell 'em
out.
anymore?
But Juul is a business. It's a company. So is it vapes
I think
in general?
specifically the Juul product.
What they
Yes.
put
So
in
obviously there's
theirs.
100 million
Vaping
different
options.
vape
Yeah.
options
Yeah,
now.
So then it's just you're gonna go to whatever the giant pill one is right now.
Oh, God.
I think that
Ew,
one looks
those-
dumb.
I feel like, yeah, I don't know. And maybe that's just like, I feel like aesthetically, vaping looks so stupid.
Yes.
Like, and maybe it's just
Yeah.
because like in old timey movies, it was like, you
Smoking
know,
was
like
cool.
smoking at
We
the
were taught
bar.
that.
Like it was cool, right?
Yeah.
It looked cool. And maybe,
I mean,
now-
maybe I shouldn't say
kinda
this out
looks
loud.
cool.
I feel like it still kind of looks cool. Like in movies
Yeah.
when
But
people
back
smoke.
then, they didn't know how bad it was for you.
Right.
So
Well, yeah.
it
Big
I
wasn't.
don't
deal,
know.
right?
My dad was born in the early 50s,
Uh-huh.
something like that. He's old as hell too. You guys know.
The early 50s.
Yes.
And he says his thing when I was growing up was always anyone my age or younger should not smoke because we knew it was bad to smoke when I was a kid.
Right, like the 70s, 60s, it
Like-
started being like, oh, turns out these are killing you.
Yeah, like
And
he's
everyone was like, oh, well, too bad. Like, we're
anyone
already...
over like under the age of 60 should not smoke because
Yeah.
you know it's not gonna be good for you. But I
Right.
will say on the record, it is kind of cool looking sometimes. Like it seems more appealing to smoke as like a drunk cigarette kind of vibe
Yeah.
than to be like, hey, you know what I really want? I want to hit a jewel.
That's
Hit a
what I'm
vape.
saying. And
Like-
so we'll go out to like, right, bars and clubs and like people will be just out on the dance floor hitting one of those ridiculous looking vapes. And
Yeah,
I,
like the giant ones.
I just don't get it. Maybe I'm not seeing the,
And then
maybe
it
I'm
reeks
just
like
not addicted to
cotton candy.
nicotine.
Yes,
Not
it
yet,
smells so
anyway.
Well.
bad.
Not anymore, I should say.
Well, now that Juul is outlawed, maybe that'll inspire me to go out and get it.
Well, and then it was like dangerous. Like I had friends that would take their Juul pods because there's like a little thing I guess you insert at the bottom that has the nicotine and flavor.
Okay.
And they would find a way to like pry it open because the whole idea is it's like a one-time use. They'd be able to pry it open and then fill it back up with like triple the amount of nicotine that they bought it
God.
for.
Ugh.
Okay, well, Alpine's showing their colors on that one. Amy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Alpine is really-
I don't know
Why spend your
about.
time doing that?
I don't know.
Ingenuity, huh? They're
Alpine,
getting real.
they were like, at least there was a vape shop. It was real controversial. It was a vape shop, and they were selling vapes to kids. And ooh,
Yep.
they were pissed. They're like, "Did you hear
Well,
about
that's
that
the whole
vape shop
thing. Is
selling
now
vapes
we're trying to get
kids?"
them out of the hands of the kids. So
Yeah.
so good, great, outlaw them.
Save the kids.
Now the
Save the
kids are
kids.
literally gonna go to hard
That's kind of
drugs.
interesting, but I just did like a little.
Cara.
Okay.
I mean, right
jeez.
now, give them more time
Jeez.
for fun drugs.
Just saying.
They can just skip over all the stupid ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, go straight to the hard stuff.
True.
I'm sure something will change
Go
because
ahead.
I just did like a little cursory, Google search on
Uh-huh.
this situation, and one of the articles was saying that Juul's already applying for
Appeal, like
an appeal,
appealing.
yeah,
Sure.
because they said they didn't have all the evidence.
Oh,
that was
it's a multi
presented.
and
It was a
and
whole
talk
thing.
about like lobbyists
$1 billion
at
business.
Capitol Hill. Like it's literally $1 billion business.
Yeah, the vaping senator. He's not a senator anymore, is he?
Vaping congressman.
Oh,
No,
congressman.
he can't be in Congress.
Never heard of him.
because He had to get acquitted, or no, he had to get pardoned of his crimes. So he can no longer be in Congress, unfortunately. But he did vape in
This
Congress.
is all hearsay, of course. We
Whoa.
don't have any personal connection to the vaping congressman.
Yeah.
No, I've never met him.
No.
Nah,
Never met
never
him.
in
heard
our
of him.
lives.
Never heard of him.
No one's ever worked for him or anything like that.
Hey,
Whoa. Calm down.
best congressman I ever worked for.
Okay, all right. Now she's not only committing to that she's worked for him, but also saying that he
And-
was the best employer she's ever had.
I mean, she's only worked
No,
for two.
the best
so.
congressman I've ever worked for. I've only worked for one.
Oh, true.
The other
Okay,
one
well.
didn't get.
True.
He wasn't a
We're not
congressman.
gonna get into that now. We're not
You
gonna
know
get
what?
into
That's all semantics. It's fine.
I thought it'd be kind of interesting, Annie, for you to talk about your COVID experience because I feel like we've been hearing about COVID for the last 2.5 years, probably more. I don't even know how long.
Two and
but
a half sounds right.
2.5 years, but like I've never had the moment, and like we said earlier, neither of us here have had the moment of like finding out that we've had COVID. Because it was kind of like this scary thing for the last, probably for the first year and a year and a half. It was like really terrifying of like people are dying from this. So I can't imagine what it was like to like kind of get the confirmation that oh yeah I have COVID after all this time of.
I mean,
kind of
is it
obsessing
like
over
I
it.
feel like you were fairly tame when you told me about it.
You mean you didn't like my text that said your girl got the vid?
Yeah.
I was too casual about
No,
it.
that was fine. I mean,
I was expecting that, but
Yeah, that was on brand, truly. No, it definitely was. It was something like in my mind, because my symptoms, we were up at camp and a bunch of us were falling ill the very last day. And if you've ever done summer camp with a bunch of kids, like, at the end, your body rejects you anyway.
yeah, sure.
Like, it's just done. And I'd been staying up at till 2 a.m. every night, having these long emotional talks with students. I had 17 students that were like under me. And so with that, we do these things called one-on-ones. So I was trying to having 17 1-hour conversations about like all of their trauma and everything they're going through with the Lord.
Dang.
And so we'd have to start doing them at night. So I'd have like 2 at night, and then I'd go into like 2 in the morning, then wake up at 5 to get down to do another one. It just became crazy. I was getting like zero sleep. You're running around all day. It's like the weather was so drastically changing. It would be like pouring rain and then be like 95 degrees. And then, they're like, let's go on a hike. Let's do this. Let's do that. You're running around, you're eating food that you're not used to. So honestly, I just figured that my body had shut down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, all these students and all these other people started having the same symptoms. And I was like, maybe like something's going around. And then on the bus ride home, the kid sitting in front of me was like, I was feeling awful. And then he was feeling like even worse than me. And he had like these glazed eyes. And I just like kept on checking on him. And I was just like, in my mind, I went, these freaking kids gave me COVID. I'm gonna be so mad.
Well,
and
Dang.
I like took a nap on the bus. I woke up. I felt so much better. I was like, oh, cool. We're chilling, and then the next morning I had one of the students, one of the 17 students I had texted and said that she had tested positive. And then they had all kind of individually done tests. And I knew my dad was coming home from vacation with my mom for this surgery that day. And so it was like a matter of like, I had to test because honestly, I felt a lot better. I didn't want to be like, oh no, like, I'm just going to say it's a cold. Like, I was like, shoot, like he can't get COVID if it is COVID. And so I took one of those at-home tests, which like, thank goodness, they sent those in the mail to like one of the ones that the government was like, do you need 4 COVID tests? I had to text my mom sheepishly. I was like, do we have those tests? And she was like, uh-oh. And so it came back and it says like wait 15 minutes and like you basically like swab your nose, you stick it in the little solution and you like drop it.
I feel like in like 5 minutes.
Oh, it was automatic.
Oh my gosh.
Like I literally, it dropped and it was like, zzz, and it was like the 2 lines. It was like COVID.
Dang.
And honestly, like I remember when this COVID first happened and I got sick and I lost my taste and my smell. And I was so scared to go get a test because it was like back when it was like you were like patient 0. They were saying like they were announcing how many cases popped up in your town. Yeah. And Alpine was like, we have no COVID cases. And then I remember when someone finally got COVID in Alpine, and everyone's like, who is it? Who is it?
It's
Who got
Annie.
COVID? Who brought COVID? And I remember like being so scared to get my test result. But honestly, it was like so late in the game now that it came back positive. And I was like, ugh. Classic.
Dang it.
Classic.
Typical me.
I think the kind of like stigma has worn off, which is nice in that way. I've been trying to really humble myself and like remind myself through this because like for me, like I said earlier, I have like an extremely mild case.
Mm-hmm.
I have, my immune system sucks anyway. I'm really shocked I haven't gotten COVID earlier, truly. Like my tonsils swell at least
once a week,
every 2 months. Yeah, truly. And so as for a sore throat, really, this is nothing compared to how that hurts. And then as for fatigue, which is like my mom got COVID a couple months ago and that was her big thing. And she was like, it was the fatigue that kills me. Like it was so hard. With PCOS, fatigue is one of the like major symptoms. So like, I'm like, oh, this ain't even as fatigued as I've been. Like,
bring it on.
This is actually kind of nice compared to what I'm used to.
I was like, wow, this is like kind of a vacation illness, which is not. It's not.
It's
and that's
not.
Where, and that's
Just
where
want to
I'm
make
like
that
trying
very
to
clear
really,
to everyone.
I'm like trying to really like humble it and like remind myself as I have this of like people have lost loved ones to what I'm going through right now.
Totally.
And, like,
Oof, yeah.
I had this thing. This is a weird thing that to think back of is I had a physical therapist once when I broke my wrist, and they have like this like basically like Play-Doh that you play with, and like there's different thicknesses, and it's to like rebuild like the muscles in your hands and your wrist and like strengthen it. And I remember someone was like getting assigned the color of Play-Doh that I had just had, and I walked by and I said, I was like younger, I was like, oh, that one's so easy, it'll be fine. And my physical therapist was like pulled me aside and was like, just because it's easy for you, like that might be like an extreme struggle for them. So like saying that, oh, like it's easy, don't worry about
Dang.
it. Like, isn't it helping?
Dang.
And I remember like obviously like seared in my mind because I was so embarrassed and like
Called
shamed.
out.
Called out. But like it truly is real. Like so just because like, you know, what I had said earlier before we started recording is like I had texted someone who I knew also has COVID at this time. And saw how they were doing, and they were like, oh, I have like you know, an insane fever and my throat is killing me, and you know, I like can't get out of bed kind of vibes. And I was like, oh,
dang.
like, you know, and it's just like you have to remind yourself that like they're there are people who lost like loved ones to this, and there are people who are on ventilators right now. And like, I'm so blessed to have like, you know, I think it's kind of been this thing where we forget how serious this illness can be.
Sure.
But for me and my journey of COVID, it's very like, it's been nice in that sense that I, you know, have been able to do things and like podcast and sit up and not just be bedridden. And
Totally.
you know, I can still talk. I still have my taste.
I want to jump around a little bit because you brought up something that kind of sparked my interest when you said like, oh, you spent all last week at this summer camp, right? And you were with this kind of pot of girls, 17 girls, and you were doing one-on-one hour-long catch-ups and just like hear their stories and everything. What is it like being a teenager, and let alone a teenage girl like these days? I mean, that's a weird question, but I mean, when you're talking about like,
about this?
What's it like to be a teenage girl?
Let me clarify.
A teenager.
I want to know what it's like to be
What do those conversations look like right now? I don't know. Like I'm just realizing how out of touch I sound when I'm like, I don't, you know, these vapes, what are these kids doing? And you brought up like shared experiences and like how experiences can be different for certain people. For some reason, it just like sparked my curiosity in that.
It has definitely been, it's been a weird year with these kids. I kind of took them back over when COVID started. I've had some of these students since they were sixth graders, and they're now seniors in high school. So like I've really
and this is your small group at your church, right?
Yes. Yeah, small group in quotations because it is my roster does have 23 students.
Wow,
big group.
Yes,
big group. And so like when people are like, "Oh, that's so cool!" Like these girls, most of them are in a small group. I go, this practically is my small group. We're actually missing some.
Wow.
Yeah, we had to be split between two cabins. Is really fun.
Yeah.
But it definitely is like super strange because there's also this divide of politics. So like we have a group chat, and when I had one student text and was like, "Hey, I got COVID. You guys might want to test." And then you have some girls saying like, "Oh yeah, I got tested. I don't have it. I got tested, this and that." And then you have students who are like, "Don't test. That's stupid. Like this is all fake."
No.
Yeah, and it's and I'm like, okay,
that young?
Well, it's you're just repeating your parents' opinions.
Yeah,
at
I
this
guess you're
point.
right.
What's
But
the age range of your 23?
They're 17. They're 16, 17. So like,
Oh, okay.
the reality is like that's at this point like they're forming their own opinions of it. And so I never want to belittle opinions, especially of like young forming opinions. I mean, my strong opinions I had at 17 like compared to now are totally different.
Yep.
And like that's just a growing thing. And I think it's so hard because these kids like are growing up in this age of like activism, which I don't think like we grew up in, kind of like in 2015, like gay rights, right? Like gay marriage legalized. And I think that was like the big thing for us. But these kids, like it was like every 2 months was some big thing, was some like history having moment. And so like for them, it's every 2 seconds there's something else to have a political opinion about.
Yep.
And like while we were at camp, that Supreme Court, decision over Roe versus Wade got overturned. That came out during camp, and luckily these kids don't have access to internet, but some of the adults do. And it was just like so shocking once we got. I almost kind of forgot about it because you're like up on this mountain, you don't really like pay attention.
You're supposed to like separate yourself from the world.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden we're driving back down the mountain. All the kids get cell service, and all of a sudden they start finding out and they start talking about it. And I was kind of like in my mind, like, why do you like? I mean, like, why are you guys even talking about this? Like, you're in high school. Is this really at the forefront of your mind? But like, that's the difference of this generation. Is it is in their forefront?
Oh
like,
yeah.
This is,
and that's
like,
that's fairly old
here.
too, generally speaking. Like as soon as they're on, I feel like as soon as they're on social media, they're engaged in this conversation. Good, bad, and ugly. Like
I guess
they're
it
a part of
depends
it
on
now.
who you follow. So like, if you have like older friends, like how people in high school have like friends in college, or like I guess it just depends on who you follow.
Oh, look at that.
Let me pop that. Oh, Yeah, but it definitely like it's weird because I'm so used to having those heavy, hard conversations of like what to do about this and what to do about that. And recently I had a student in our small group get diagnosed with cancer. So like a lot of our conversations leading up to camp was like how to be a friend to someone with cancer and, you know, what does that look like and understanding this new normal. And it was funny because like we get to camp and like I think I sometimes forget that they're high school girls because they talk like adults.
Yeah.
Because they are struggling with adult things and they're talking about, you know, reproductive rights and, you know, all these like theological questions about the church and church hurt and all this stuff. And then I had like 3 one-on-ones where they were talking about boys and like, how do you know if like you like a boy for like the right reasons and all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Normal high school things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that was the weirdest part is like, all of a sudden I was like, shoot, you need to learn this stuff too. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to freaking have your political opinions figured out yet, but like, you need to know what to look for in like a boy you like, you know, like you need to know if he's like manipulating you. Like those are the things you need to figure out in high school, not, you know, not your position on Roe v. Wade and like, shall it be overturned as a Christian heart, you know, like.
So do you, I mean, do you think so? Like, I guess that's kind of my next question is like, well, what is the age where they should start engaging? I mean, because Annie, you like, you know, right? Your whole thing was I want to go like be in the mix, right? You're like I want to be a part of government and like go to the White House and all of that. Like, when did that start for you? And I guess it's just an open question to all of us. Like, should kid like I mean like kids is like a loose use of the word, like
18-year-olds
young, what age is like the age where they should engage? I don't know, like
No, I think that's a good question.
when is their
like,
age, like when is their opinion valid? When are we like gonna stop sheltering them from it? I don't know, you know what I mean? Do you understand what I'm getting at?
I think there's like a fine line, right? Because
Uh-huh.
like to shelter them, because I always tell them, especially like a Christian worldview, is like, you know, people like to use this idea of like, oh, God calls us to be in the world but not of it, as an excuse to like separate themselves from things that are happening around
Sure.
them. But what I always turn back to them, I go, yeah, but you're still in the world, so you can't hide from the things that are also in this world.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think they need to know about like, you know, their stance on, you know, gay marriage, and they need to know about like rights that they have that might be, you know, overturned and stuff like that.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think there's a matter of like, it's not our position to like burden them with our opinions of it.
Sure.
And I think that's where I struggle with parents a lot.
Uh-huh.
Is, you know, the kids, like when I was like in high school, it was probably their age when I started having these opinions and I started having these conversations. But at the same time, my parents, you know, had also like, I think we all probably felt it. Like I always say, like, until you're at least 23, like your politics are your parents.
Interesting.
Because, like, the reality is you didn't look into what that political party looked like. You know,
Like you said,
actually
you're just
represents.
regurgitating what your parents, what you've heard, right?
Yeah, and same with religion. I think that like your religion and your like relationship with Jesus, a lot of times it's a reaction of your parents too. It's kind of like you're just following in their footsteps, and then at some point you're like, oh shoot, I want to make my own footsteps.
Sure.
Oh,
And
wow.
so-
That's beautiful.
I agree with you in a
Seriously.
lot of ways, and I think I disagree with you in a few, because I think
That's good.
with some, like in some cases, like, you know, like we're talking about a lot of things across the like political spectrum, right? We're talking about, you know, abortion rights, and we're talking about like the right to, you know, for gay marriage and your sexuality, and we're even talking about like gun control, right? And a lot of conversations, it's about like school shootings, right? And I honestly think that young people are at the forefront of a lot of these conversations and kind of the subject matter, you know, and I think we owe it to them to have a voice in that. But at the same time, it's like, well, like, what about the children? Like, what about their youth, and like protecting that innocence for as long as possible? Because I think there is something really special and formative about like having innocence when you're young and not having to know about all these things. But at the same time, I think like the next generation is already deciding, like we're already going to be built by people younger than us. I don't know.
Oh yeah. And the thing that's hard too, especially in like politics, is if you want to get into politics, you need to start when you're 16, 17. You
Sure.
need to be interning. You need to have your foot in the door. And I think that's the real hard thing about it is like, as much as you want to, I look at my students and I'm like, man, like, why do you even care about this right now? Like, wouldn't you rather talk about something else, like not as freaking heavy? Like, as the world has not been heavy enough for you in the last 2 years. But the reality is, like, if they want to change it, if they want to have anything to do with the change that's going to come, like, they need to sign up for it now.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like
The roster's going to be filled.
I truly didn't really understand politics, and I still don't understand a lot about politics until I was in AP Gov my senior year of high school. Because I mean, I never wanted to be in politics, but I took that class because it was an AP class, and I was like, I guess I'll take it.
Sure.
And that's when I saw a lot of my classmates be like, oh, they're like, they want to be president one day. Oh,
right.
They want to like
at least be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you think, John, about all of it?
I think it's a fine line, right? Like, it's easy to, I think both of you have created perspectives that I think I shifted back and forth from, honestly, because my head goes to like, yeah, you should let your kids, like, I would want my kids to make their own opinion, and I assume that they will, right? And I want them to like have their thoughts, and I want to disagree, and I want to have constructive conversation, you know, just like me and my parents disagree on a number of things, you know. And I think it's good. Like, I don't fault my parents for thinking that way, and I assume that they don't fault me, you know. But at the same time, I think as a parent's perspective, things start to shift too. Like, you feel like responsible that your kids should be maybe a certain way, and and I could see that angle of like, you know, you want to tell them what you think you know about life before they have to see that they don't experience the hardships that you went through. And that doesn't necessarily apply to politics, but just in general, like, that's kind of the mindset, right? Is you're like, well, I want to tell my kids everything that I wish I would have known at 16 and at 17. And so it's a fine line. I think what's important is, I think it is important to share your beliefs and your politics with the next generation, or your kids, so to speak.
Sure.
You know, and I'm obviously speaking metaphorically, like, we don't have kids, but, you know, it's like the younger generation. But at the same time, I think it's also in tandem important to share that, like, it's okay to have a different perspective, because I think that's where I saw in my parents' generation mostly that breakdown is where it was like, this is kind of my viewpoint, and like, there wasn't a lot of grace in the idea of thinking differently. Like, there was always like, yeah, you can think differently, but like, that's wrong. Like, I still love you, but like, you're wrong. Whereas, like, I wish that my hope is that as we raise the next generation, as the next generation comes up, it's like, this is what I believe, and also there is a 100% like margin for error in what I believe. Like, this is what I think, but also I could be wrong.
Sure.
But that's the element that's missing from my parents' generation. Most of my parents' generation, I shouldn't say all, but like, I always feel like they're not leaving room, they're not leaving margin for being like, I don't agree with this, but it also, and it's probably wrong. Yeah. But like, I think
that's something we've maybe talked about offhand off the podcast. And Annie brought it up, and I feel comfortable like saying it too. Like, I think in the Christian, you know, I'm going to say big C church, right? Like, the church at large has a hard time with that specifically too.
Yes.
Is the critical thinking that goes into having, you know, because we throw around things like I'm going to continue talking about the church and say like, it's fine. You know, faith like a child, and like, you know, faith shouldn't make sense. Like, faith is, it's
belief.
We
it's not fact.
We chalk up faith to like, well, like, yeah, I don't have all the answers, and I'm going to accept that, and I'm going to move on. And there's a breakdown of critical thinking, because you don't, because then you start to like mop that on and apply it to everything, right?
Yeah.
And you go, well, like, yeah, well, I'm just going to, you know, have a blind trust in, like you said, what maybe the generation before me did, and I'm going to pass that on, you know, and you know, their trauma and their things that they didn't learn and they should have maybe unlearned. I'm going to now take that and go, well, yeah, this is just how we do things, and I'm going to pass that along. And as like I said, especially in the church. And and I think that just bringing it back to like the next generation, right? These young kids that are seeing everything is on TikTok now. Every opinion and I'm going to single out TikTok, but social media and the internet, right? Every opinion you can have, like, is there. And so they're taking it all in and going, oh, like, right, like, I see it from this angle, I see it from that angle, and maybe in a lot of ways it's like an echo chamber too. Like, I just, find more people that think like me, and so it's...
Yeah, how much is the algorithm pigeonholing people in their political opinions?
I'll
right?
tell you what, like, from my perspective over the weekend, ever since, Roe versus Wade got overturned, my feed has been all that and everybody's opinions on it, and I'm a fairly liberal person, and it's fairly liberal TikTok, and I'm like,
I feel like my algorithm is not like up to date, because I feel like I get a mix of everything.
Sure.
Yeah, but that also could be like...
I feel like that's good, though.
That could be like a representation.
I wish I got
you,
more of everything, I think. I don't know. Well, maybe not. Maybe.
I don't know. If you ever want... I think I mentioned this probably 20 episodes ago, but the biggest mind-bending documentary I've seen in a long time is The Great Hack. And it talks about how Trump won the election basically using social media. I mean, like there was this, they used this company that was based in Europe, and they have over 5,000 data points on every American. And that's based off of your search history, or whatever, like roughly average, of course, like more or less depending on who it is. And they were able to categorize people in what they believe they are, like moderate, extreme, either side. And then they targeted ads to those specific users in a way to like gradually turn their mindset to go, maybe I'm on the wrong side, or affirm and say I'm definitely on the right side. Obviously the side being Republican or the conservative, aka Trump side. Yes. And it was like so crazy. It makes you want to like throw your phone away. And there's documentaries that do that all the time.
I mean, and then we talk about, there's this phrase called the alt-right pipeline, right? Have you heard this before? And it's like, and it's kind of the same thing. Like, oh, I'm just maybe I'm a fairly like centrist person politically, but I see a video, a Joe Rogan clip, and he's interviewing Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro is talking about like, and he's really smart, and he's talking about a lot of stuff that I agree with, and then he mentions like, something about like crazy liberals, and you're like, yeah, and it's just kind of subliminal, and then the more the algorithm takes you into that, and now you're watching, liberals getting owned by conservative people. Oh yeah, and they're talking about how like the women's rights movement is messed up, and then it's not just women, it's women and minorities, and then you're suddenly in this viewpoint where you're like, no, I'm a centrist. I just think that white men are they're the only like viable option anymore, and you're like,
that's true.
Whoa, you're fully right, and you're fully like storming the Capitol at that point.
Interesting.
And that's the we talk about like that's the other side of social media that is not good. It's all there, and you have to critically consider it.
And it's so hard because these days, since you can, on these social media apps, you choose who your friends are. You're most likely going to lean towards the friends with your same political views.
Confirmation bias, right?
So then you never get other people's opinions. So you always think that your opinion is right, or your opinion is the true one.
Because it's the only one, right?
Because it's the only one that I'm seeing.
That's kind of scary. I think about that a lot. Like, I think I have sometimes like I'm around a lot of people that agree with me, and it kind of freaks me out. I'm like, oh wait, like, am I surrounding myself with the right people?
Right.
Because and we're the same way in this. Like, we do like to have hard conversations, but the problem with hard conversations is like not a lot of people want to sit there and actually hash it out.
And a big part of, I feel like the culture is changing in that, like, a part of having those hard conversations is like, well, now I have to convince you that here's why my part of the conversation is correct. Well, you're actually wrong for thinking that, and here's why, and I'm going to totally take you down.
We go back and forth for hours, and then
nothing is achieved. And we call it a podcast.
Yeah. Agreed.
That's true.
We call it a podcast,
and we call it What the Podcast.
What the Podcast, and put it out there for everyone to hear.
Yeah.
I think I think that, yeah, this idea that we start surrounding ourselves with similar people is like a natural phenomenon that we do. I mean, like, even look at, we were talking about New York a couple episodes ago, the same exact idea, right? When settlers came, you surround yourself with people who are familiar to you and share similar opinions and similar backgrounds. But nowadays, I think we're having this, like, we're almost too exposed to the world that we're forgetting that, like, other people actually do exist. Because it feels so normal. It almost feels like just fake social media, right? Of like, oh yeah, some idiots have those opinions, but those aren't real.
Yep.
And like, you know, I was up
Not
at, like I said, I was up at camp when the Supreme Court decision had gotten announced, and we were, you know, about to pray in this leader meeting with all the counselors who are up there from all the different churches. And someone raises their hand. They said, it's not a question, but just so everyone knows, Roe versus Wade got overturned. And like, a couple of people kind of like, whoa, yeah, and like celebrate. And, you know, the person leading the meeting just kind of went, okay, well, like, let's pray over the day, and continued like the meeting.
on.
And I think it was just
Let's
this
not
moment.
talk about this right now.
Yeah, there was just this moment where I was like, not every Christian is a conservative necessarily.
Yeah.
And like that person that mentioned that, I'm like, they are blindly unaware of that.
Yep.
They did not think that
They thought they were gonna
They
get
think,
like a
oh,
roaring
here we go.
applause,
Like,
yeah.
this is epic,
Like,
right? Hey, ready,
this is
Christians?
epic
Roe
news.
versus Wade. This is the thing we all want, right?
Oh my gosh, just to be, imagine that person like being the one person in the room who like feels like they need to announce that.
Or like, imagine being a counselor in that room who's gotten an abortion. Like, I know
Yeah.
Christians who have gotten abortions, and
Yeah.
it's just like, it's that blindness to the other side.
Yeah.
And it's like the lack of like, it's almost, yeah, like the blindness of like, oh, well, that's not real. Like,
Yeah.
people who are around me are going to be like me, because that's
Yes.
of course.
And
that's
in the
what
same
world
way-
surrounds me with similar people.
Yeah. In the same way, it's the Christian view is maybe like, oh, well, those godless people out there that have abortions and they're just like killing babies every other week. Like, that's just their, we're putting an end to that. It's like,
Yeah.
what is that really? That's your read on the situation because you're not in that world, because you don't like.
And that's all you think it is.
Yeah.
It's why
Exactly.
people get yeah.
Interesting. It's very, very interesting, the whole situation with that. Like, I have been like just kind of just trying to process it all. I feel like I still haven't like anything that's been around for 50 years that gets overturned.
Not
like,
even 50. It wasn't even around for 50.
No,
like,
it has been.
it has been
No,
around.
it was less than 50.
Oh, really?
Well, they're
Like,
saying
barely.
pretty
Just about-
close to
okay.
50, and like you just like you grew up like knowing like these are landmark cases that
Yeah.
like you grow up like knowing kind of what they have to do with. Now you don't know the like specifics, but like you just know, and then to hear like after nearly 50 years. All of a sudden, it gets overturned, and that to me,
And they
was
just
so,
did it like over a weekend. Like,
Yeah.
And like, it's so funny is that when the documents leaked about how they were going to relook at it, everyone was like, "Well, nothing's going to happen. Like they're just relooking
like
at
they
it."
couldn't possibly,
Like,
right?
Remember
women's
when we
rights
talked
won't
about
go
it on this show,
backwards.
and we were
Who-
like,
who thinks that?
And we were literally like, "Oh, but they're just looking at it, but nothing will ever." Like we were literally like, "Oh, they're just checking it out."
And mind you, it means little to nothing for California.
I know.
As we are like
We're like the safe haven state.
that,
one of
and
them.
Gavin
Gavin
Newsom
Newsom's
got on
making
his
sure
thing,
of
and
it,
he's
yeah.
like, "Hey, just so you know, like, we'll even help you. Like, we'll make sure that if you're coming from another state, like, you can get one.
Yeah,
you know,
he
And the,
said that
and the
safely and
doctors
swiftly."
here cannot be sued.
He said
Right.
that, hey,
Out
yeah,
of
they
state.
won't extradite anybody or anything to any
what
other
does any of
states.
it mean? For me, I feel like it's the principle of doing it. Like, I feel like they're making a conscious effort to like overturn Roe versus Wade. Like, is like such a statement in and of itself.
Yeah, I don't.
Like, whatever the logistics of it are after that, I don't know. Like, obviously, like certain states will make, will try to like ban it officially, like in ink, and some states
some already
won't,
have.
and yeah, some already have, and that's kind of how it was, right?
Yeah.
Before, and so
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's kind of a way of
It's
furthering
like
the divide a little bit because
Totally,
like
it feels
it's-
like
it
it.
doesn't even feel like conservatives were even like that like talking. It wasn't even like they were like
the
worried
big
about
talking
it.
point.
You know
I
what
mean,
I'm saying?
yeah, I don't know.
I have a
Like
little
they're
bit of a
happy.
different
Oh, go ahead.
opinion of it.
What do you think, Annie?
So from like a legal standpoint,
Yes.
Roe versus Wade was like really shoddy work on the Supreme Court in the first place.
Sure.
It's like the example. It makes me upset because it feels like a good example of like, you know, like
Got it on a technicality.
lifetime lifetime politicians just trying to be like political, you know, celebrities who are like, oh, we're gonna pass this thing, it's gonna be this big thing, and they like the founding was shoddy at best. Like they've been talking about overturning it for basically since they made that decision because it's founded on such like loose standings, and like the thing that's annoying about it, it's like you're making these landmark decisions on shoddy standings at best, and like that's wrong of you just because you're, you know, these 9 justices, like you're not going to take the time to like actually
like build
find
new
real,
legislature. Like
yeah, like build it. Don't be
if
like,
you're gonna pull it down,
right to
build it up
privacy.
like better, right? Make it more
Yeah.
solid. Like why would we debate back and forth? That's what sorry to cut you off, but like
No, you're good.
why do we debate like the words of the Constitution like they're scripture or something? We boil down the words like, you know, whenever we talk about, you know, gun control, it's like the Second Amendment says in black and white, like, and it's like it clearly meant something different. It's not the Bible, like we, you know, and obviously that's a whole other
Yeah.
conversation with the words of the Bible, but like really we're going to boil down to the words that these guys wrote on the Constitution and like there's literally amendments. Like, we'll just amend it.
Well,
like,
isn't that's like the patriotism thing? Like, our country was not made that long ago. So that's why everyone is so, like, it's so prevalent in today because, like, Britain was so long ago.
Right.
Do
And
they
like,
really, like, have something like the
I mean, their
Constitution that
stuff
they
is, like,
always go back to?
right? I
Well,
mean,
it's like interesting like that, right?
correct me,
Because, like,
Henny. Let's hear it.
even though like, yeah, we are one of the newer countries in the world, but our form of democracy is what, you know, basically every parliament and every other form of democracy has modeled themselves after. So even though, yes, we're like one of the newer countries and Britain's been around forever, Britain basically copied us after a while. They're like, oh
Sure.
shoot, like, yeah,
So
maybe
it-
a representative
So it was this.
democracy is the best
It's
way
this
to go.
radical thing, right? Let's have it run by the people, and let's have certain representatives represent the people in these territories. But like, I don't know. I have a breakdown when we start to like hold the Constitution in such
High standings.
like it's this like godly thing that like came down
Oh,
and was
yeah,
like, oh,
it's-
good, us Americans have this document that's going to tell us how to do government perfect. Like, I don't know. I get
No,
cynical
it's
in
definitely,
that.
It's not perfect. And like you know, I saw this, I hate to reference it, but like TikTok not too long ago, and it's like, you guys are talking about these founding fathers. These founding fathers agreed on the 3/5 compromise that a vast
Yeah.
majority of humans would only count as 3/5.
Gnarly.
You know, and
The
it's
same
like-
dudes were like, oh yeah, all men are created equal except for
Except for those
and
ones.
also except for women, and also
You know, and-
Yeah.
Jeez.
so
Yeah,
gnarly.
I think
And
it's
it's
because
like- and
when people go back to the Constitution, they're not thinking about that because that's done with. Like, oh,
Yeah, they're
that's
like, oh,
over
we already
with.
overturned
They already
that.
did that.
We solved the slavery thing.
But it's like, okay,
right?
but every other amendment that's still there was created at the same time.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's like, you know, they're like, this patriotism is so like deep rooted, and I think there's like good reasons. Like I'm very proud to be an American, and I'm proud of the Constitution, but I also think that like to have a blind faith in it is dumb.
Yeah.
To have a blind faith
know, like,
in
there's
a
a-
lot of things is dumb. You know, like, and a piece of paper is definitely one of them. you
It's
know?
like, and if especially like on this argument of Christianity, right? Like, you know, these Christians having these hard stances on, you know, conservative Christians and everything. At the same time, like, you know, if you truly believe in the Bible, you believe that everyone is sinful and broken. So to put like full trust in man is literally going against Christianity. So it's that kind of thing where it's like, okay, then like, what are we doing here? Like, we're having these deep arguments of like, you know, this is what God wanted, this faithful country. And as someone who studied government at a freaking Christian school, like this is what 90% of my papers were about, of this idea of like, if you are putting your faith in men to run this country, not men meaning like the gender, but like humans in general,
mankind.
mankind, like then you're already on the wrong foot.
Yeah.
Like
Sorry, I was totally listening to you, and I was totally taking in your points.
Be
but
real.
I had to do
up.
my be real.
Be real popped up.
Oh.
Okay.
I
So-
also did it.
That's what's wrong with America.
So basically,
right there.
everything you just said,
Yeah.
out in
it.
one ear and out the other.
Yeah. Yeah. As men, see, and
You
that's
know
what
what?
we do.
Typical.
Not put your faith in men.
Typical.
Typical men.
We kept saying F the patriarchy. Little did we know.
Patriarchy.
Patriarchy F's you back.
Gosh.
Jeez.
Man,
John?
oh man.
It's so true.
Any thoughts? I'm always curious your take on things.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we talked a little bit about this Roe versus Wade a couple weeks ago when the documents leaked about they were looking at it. And I think we all kind of agree, like the government, like nobody likes when the government tells you what you can and can't do, like anything.
And
You know
I feel
what I'm
like
saying?
you only
Unless
have
it
so
makes
much.
unless it makes sense. Like wear your
Right,
seatbelt.
of course.
Well, the irony is that that a lot of the Republican Party, and I'll be honest, about my political affiliation,
Go ahead.
I'm registered as Republican, but like I don't nearly vote Republican, like nearly ever.
Sure.
That's when I originally registered when I was 18, and talk about parents, like I was heavily influenced by my parents. You know, like I just didn't know anything else.
Sure.
And my viewpoints has changed, and I just feel like the irony is that a lot of these Republican, conservative Christian viewpoints, they're so heavy about like the government can't take my guns away, the government can't tell me to get a shot, and like I'm happy, like I agree, but also like
Sure.
then how can you stand behind this? How can
Yeah.
you stand behind the government saying a woman can't have an abortion? And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like I just don't understand. Like it's a life. Like sure, that's what you believe, and I believe that too.
Sure.
Like I do believe that we're like God created us in the womb, and I agree with that. But like on this side of heaven on earth, like science doesn't say that.
Yep.
And like, so when you compare having an abortion to murder, it's like it's not even in the same ballpark. You know what I'm saying? Like on science here on Earth, like these are our laws, like here on Earth. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So you can't apply a law to something that because a lot of laws are based off of science, and science would tell you that like that group of cells. Now, while I believe it's a life, it's not nearly a life. So to compare those
The
things,
potential
it's just,
for life.
it's just like stupid.
I
you know?
saw a great, or I heard a great thing. A comparison was made to, let's say, if you had a child and it was fully born. You have this child and you're raising this child, and your child, we find out it's got some health complications and it needs a kidney. And it's like, and you, as its parent, are the only one that can provide your kidney to this child.
Yeah.
You can choose to not give your child the kidney.
True.
Albeit that would be gnarly, right?
That'd be pretty rough.
Obviously, that's a whole
And no
different
parent
thing.
would do that.
But legally speaking,
Yeah.
you
Find
don't. You
someone
can.
else.
You can choose to not give your child that kidney, and if the kid dies, that's a morbid way to look at a similar situation. But it's also not, because in an abortion, your kid's not born yet, like it's not a person yet. Right.
Yeah.
Cluster of cells.
The conversation is
Most of the time.
You're right. That's the
Here's-
argument. Is it goes, well, when does life start? It starts. But I think take that conversation out of it, and it's just your bodily, like your agency.
Yes.
Right. Is nobody can make you give up a part of your part of your body. That's like such an invasive thing. Nobody can make you do that.
Yeah.
The gnarly thing that I've been seeing on like TikTok
Let's hear
is
it.
like, for example, today I saw a girl being like post like, I was 9 years old when I first got my period. I was 11 years old when I was raped. And she posts her pictures and she
Oof.
say, can you imagine this girl having a baby?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that actually would kill you. It would kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing, and it's also the one thing that came out that I was like, okay, that's really gnarly, is now a bunch of states have these trigger laws that once this one came into effect, all these other ones that they already voted yes on immediately went into effect.
But they weren't in
And-
effect because of Roe versus
Yes.
Wade.
One of them was that women who are sick or have cancer, they are now, or women who have cancer who are pregnant, they are now not allowed to go through cancer treatments or disease
Whoa,
treatments
because it's like-
because they are pregnant and because it
Well, yeah,
could
it would kill the baby
it
anyway.
would suffer the baby. So
Wow.
now you're risking both of those lives. It's so crazy.
And there you go, right? Like the critical thinking breaks down with all of those situations. What about if the woman has cancer? And she's going through chemo? What about if she gets raped?
And the message that is flowing on Instagram was a DM from a doctor saying that a woman came in and had an ectopic pregnancy, and the doctor was on the phone with lawyers for 9 hours trying to get around the Roe v. Wade overturn.
Where can she go? Where can she...
To operate on her.
Oh.
And 9 hours later,
yeah, because the doctor gets frustrated.
She finally got...
Pregnancy is when it's in the fallopian tube.
Yeah,
so
and it can kill you.
It won't go to term, it can kill you, and it'll also destroy your fallopian tube. Yeah. So your chance of having another baby is really low.
This doctor DM'd someone and was like, I have to tell somebody because I was in the room, and this poor woman was not able to have a surgery for 9 hours, and she had 900 cc's, I think it's 900 cc's of blood in her abdomen, and she almost died because it took so long.
It just like... You know what I mean? It's the
very
critical
frustrating.
it's the critical thinking goes out the window when we try to paint with a big brush that says like, yeah, abortion, like you can't have an abortion. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, what about no, you can't do it. Like, oh, like we have to have access to our guns. Okay, but like kids are dying in schools. They do be dying out here. It's like not like shall not be infringed.
I'll tell you what though,
really,
it's because it's even more frustrating from the Christian community. Like being a Christian and working at a church or volunteering at a church and feeling the judgment. I'm not even saying that my struggle nowhere nearly compares to a woman who has had an abortion or wants to have abortion or is thinking about having an abortion, because that is a whole nother level. But like just being in the Christian community and feeling like you can't have the thought that I had like just now, or it makes me a bad Christian for thinking that for thinking that the government shouldn't be able to tell a woman this or this, like that's just even more frustrating. Is like it's not even bad enough that a woman like this is in place, but it's also that like even if you agree with women on this standard, you are then labeled as like a bad Christian or like a person that doesn't really believe in God.
One of them.
Yeah, it's like
one of those Christians
like,
over there.
And I've said this before in our argument. Like Christianity, and we talked about this earlier. The church needs to change in a lot of ways. And this is just one area that like we need to stop focusing on telling people what they can and can't do, and like providing love and support in every single area. You know what I'm saying?
And also understanding that everyone has different opinions.
And being like, you want to have an abortion? Well, let me give you some resources that might change your mind. But even if you do decide to have an abortion, let's also still talk about that.
It's like, and even not all the gnarly things. Like, oh, why did you why is this person deciding to have an abortion? Oh, because they had a one-night stand with somebody and they can't afford to, raise up a baby on their own. Like it doesn't work out in their situation. It's like, it's not like when we find out like somebody is in a bad situation at the church, like the church should, I mean, I'll say shouldn't be like, oh yeah, sucks, like bummer that you're going through that over there. Like, what the heck? Like, why are we not going, wow, let's come alongside you and help you in that.
I was actually, it was so funny. I was talking to my grandfather before it officially got overturned about this. And I love talking to my grandpa because he always presses me for like to defend my opinions. And
that's always fun.
But what's funny is like going off what John said, like I'm a Republican. I actually wasn't raised in a Republican household even a little bit. And it wasn't until I really started like looking into what the Republican Party itself stands for that I decided to register as a Republican. Do I think that the Republicans in positions right now are good representations of what that party stands for? No. And that's part of the reason I wanted to register, is to help vote people I think are better representations of what the party actually wants to get done in. And so I feel like it gives Republicans a bad name too when you have these like super, hardcore people making these hardcore opinions. And so it's always funny. My grandpa always tries to press me because he, kind of grew up in more of that was hardcore Republican for a long time and softened a lot. And we were talking about Roe v. Wade and abortion. And it was funny because he's making all these stances and saying all these things. I go, the people you're going to have having these kids are the people who can't afford it already. Because the rich people are going to get abortions. Yeah. They're going to figure it out. They're going to find out loopholes. They're going to, they can afford a lawyer on the phone for 9 hours. They can, they'll afford it. They'll have that private doctor come to their home. Like, this isn't a matter of that. The people we're asking to have these babies are the people that you don't want having, like you're saying, like, oh, I can't believe there's, people on the street with kids. Isn't that horrible? It's like,
it inherently makes it worse for low income people, and it's been proven to like minorities too, like people of color are like way more affected by this too.
There's on either, if you're going to take out the middleman, then you have to make communication between the two other ends better. So either you need to make birth control way more accessible, and period products, everything needs to be way more accessible for people. Or you need to make the child welfare system and like foster care and we don't have orphanages in America, but
the foster care system is effed completely.
Yeah, and that's when you tell a woman, oh, why don't you just give the baby up for adoption? And then it's like because they're going to go into an awful system and grow up an awful
potentially
life.
go their entire childhood and never get adopted and age out of the foster care system.
In my own view, in a perfect world, you wouldn't have abortions because it wouldn't even be needed. Because birth control would be so well done.
Because sex ed is so clear and like made available to every teenager in America, right?
And it's not such a stigma to talk about sex,
right? And like you said, easy access to birth control.
Or there's not a stigma to adopt a child within the United States. It's not going to cost you $30,000 to adopt a child out of the foster care system. The foster care system is well built with perfect homes and people, these kids are safe and getting good educations and having great opportunities to succeed out of the system. It's not a death sentence to children and like a horrible cycle of abuses. That is the perfect system for me. And like in my eyes, as Christian, if there's a world where we can get away without having abortions accessible, amazing. But like the reality is, if we're going to do that, we can't make that call unless we fix everything else first.
Yep, true. And that's just the unfortunate thing is this doesn't make abortions go away. It just makes them more incredibly complicated and brings up 100 more issues with it. That's just not something I'm really.
The argument of the kids, right? Of like, it's for the kids. I'm like, okay, then these kids are born, and you're like, here, put it in the foster care system. I don't want to pay taxes to take care of you. Like, get a job.
Of
course. It's like, well, and I think, John, I don't know if it was you or someone else who was talking about this pastor's position of like, okay, now that this is done, like, it's our Christian duty to like donate to places that are going to help these people.
Yeah.
If you think that we've succeeded, that now abortions are illegal, like now you actually have to step up.
Yeah, I heard somebody. It was the pastor at my church, I think, and he kind of addressed it at the beginning of service on Sunday, and I was like, ooh, I got a little nervous.
Brace yourself,
because my family and I are really invested in this church. I've told you a little bit about I'm doing like some volunteer work there, and so I thought this could go one or two ways, like the way he's the leader of this church. So if he says something that like I'm really uncomfortable with, I'm gonna really have a hard time staying here, Yep. And he addressed all the points. I mean, he said, he talked about how that this happened and explained what happened, and then also said like, but this isn't just like a Christianity win. He's like, this now means like we are responsible for donating to facilities and organizations that are going to help women make the right call that we think the right call is, that we think God is calling the right call.
Because there's a deficit in the place of this. Like there is, like you said, now there's a bigger need. And are we just celebrating the fact that like, oh, like F these women? Yeah, like who cares?
And
like
so
they don't get to do their abortions anymore. It's like,
and so I thought that was that was a good response, because at first I was like, oh, if he does the normal Christian abortion thing of like, woohoo, yay, I'm gonna be really like disheartened because I am disheartened in this whole thing. You know, like I feel mixed. You know, like my religion is telling me one thing, and then also at the same time, but I'm like, this can't be the decision. You know, and so I think I've decided that I'm going to continue to fight for women's body autonomy on this side of heaven, and also donate money, to organizations that can help women choose to have their child. You know what I'm saying? Because that's ultimately what I want. But I'm not going to judge women if they don't. But like, I'm gonna donate my money and resources to places that will help women like carry a child to term, because I think that would be so awesome. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to I can't stand around and let the government tell women what to do with their body, because that's just like not who I am anymore, like at all.
Each woman is different, and each woman should have
mixed
their
it
own
anymore.
choices.
I never was like that. I've been saying
I gave that up.
Starting
anymore.
I have made a big change in my life, and I'm deciding
so good.
Women are people too.
Yeah.
Turns out.
Even the Constitution.
That's what I found out last week.
I'm something of a socialist, so you guys just expose yourselves as Republicans, and that's fine. And I'm going to accept that.
I truly don't remember what I am registered as.
You might be married to a Republican.
I truly don't remember.
I thought we both registered. You said we were going to go both registered as undeclared or undefined or whatever.
I think I registered as undeclared the very first time I registered.
It's independent.
Undeclared is when John went to Grossmont.
Undeclared is.
All right, you know what?
I go with what?
Hey, you know what? Hard conversations are good, but they're uncomfortable. And I hope that you listen to this episode and know that like we're having these conversations out of love and out of what's important.
Look, we're critically thinking. We're considering our opinions. We're sharing them in a space. Not Annie, of course. I don't know where Annie is, but we're sharing a space together. We're sharing different opinions. Dang.
My Republican bunker with all my guns and
all my guns and my live fetuses.
And if you're listening to this,
so aggressive.
If you're listening to this episode, remember to have an open mind.
Yeah.
Whichever side you're on, I hope you made it through the end of this.
Yeah.
I sure hope to.
Me too. It's a tough one, but hey, we did it.
This is our it's our last episode, so that's fun. 84. We got dragged. Guaranteed.
All right.
Guys.
It's time to go.
That's it. It's hot in here.
I think for the last 30 minutes it's been hard to breathe because it's like a sauna in here.
Dang, it is. Look at
so hot.
You see the sweat upon my brow.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I'll put the AC on a little early for you.
Let's all go get some food together.
Yeah.
Not Annie.
Not Annie.
My dad's cooking steak. but
Make some
those
pasta.
are-
Make some pasta.
I'm staying for steak.
Yeah. We will.
How sad.
Is he using that
You
new
guys
Traeger?
got, you guys
Yeah,
got
he is
Dave's
fired up.
chicken.
Yeah, we're waiting for you to come back, Annie. We ate dinner at home last week here at the house, and we're doing it this week. And then when you're back next week, we're gonna go out and have a big celebration.
And I'll be gone. I will be in Texas.
Cara will be gone.
Goodbye.
Oh, really? Nice. Oh, yeah. Next week we're doing live. Next say that.
Check in Friday morning for the live stream.
Oh, you are?
We're live streaming next Friday.
Live from the freaking lip sync
Albright
battle stage.
Amphitheater.
Albright Amphitheater.
Outdoor amphitheater.
Albright.
Maybe some guests. Maybe some musical numbers.
Next morning.
Yeah, tomorrow morning, Annie.
Listen, I have COVID. Give me a break.
No breaks.
Yeah, we didn't tell you about that, but you're finding out.
Yeah, that's great.
You'll hear about it on our Monday think tank. We will see you next week on What the Podcast.